Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Phil Carson from the RSPB and I'd like to welcome you to the second of our two webinars focused on how future agriculture policy can deliver nature-friendly farming and sustainable land management in Northern Ireland. We've developed these in partnership with the Northern Ireland Nature-Friendly Farming Network, so a big thanks to them for all of their help. For those who've joined for the first time, welcome. For those who were here last week, welcome back. Again, we've reached a capacity of 100 people taking part today, including food and farming organisations, individual farmers, environmental NGOs and policymakers. It's great to see such interest in this topic and how it applies here. Last week, we looked at how future support schemes, along with changes to business management, can help secure a more profitable future for both farming and the environment as we move towards a green recovery from COVID-19. This week, our speakers will look at why we need to invest in nature-friendly farming to do this, whilst outlining the level of investment required. This is important as we begin to move towards developing a new system of farm support in Northern Ireland, which must seek to address the numerous challenges facing both farming and the environment. These include impacts to farm incomes, climate change, the decline of nature in our countryside, issues with air and water quality, and not forgetting the impacts of Brexit and COVID-19. We mustn't look at these issues in isolation, but instead recognise their interrelated nature. For example, farmers will experience increasing challenges if we don't work together to tackle both the climate and nature emergencies simultaneously. This has been recognised by many, including the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which highlights that climate change, the disruption of ecosystems and the loss of biodiversity could seriously compromise agriculture's ability to produce the food we need in the future. This is already a concern for many farmers, with a recent survey highlighting that nearly 70% are worried about the impact that climate change will have on their businesses. And some of these impacts are already being felt. This year, we have experienced the wettest February on record, followed by an exceptionally dry spring, which has impacted farms across the country. These climate impacts will become more severe and more common unless concerted action is taken. Similarly, the public are calling for change and want to support sustainable farming, with another recent survey demonstrating that 75% of people in Northern Ireland want additional funding for farmers to deliver environmental benefits. Investment like this is essential. It will not only help safeguard the future of the farming sector, but can also deliver benefits in the here and now. A growing number of farmers have taken these challenges head on and are showcasing how nature-friendly farming can provide the solutions we urgently need. These include the first of today's panelists, who are here to share the value of nature-friendly farming in Northern Ireland, along with some of the ways that future policy can turn this vision into a reality. With this, I'd like to welcome Simon Best and Charlie Cole of the Nature-Friendly Farming Network. To give a bit of background, Simon farms at Acton House near Points Pass in County Armagh, farming around 1,200 acres of predominantly arable land, as well as an Aberdeen Angus beef herd. Simon believes sustainability must be all-encompassing, covering food production, community involvement, and the environment. His farm works well on all three fronts, producing high-quality food, safeguarding nature, and engaging with the local community. Simon is a steering group member of the Nature-Friendly Farming Network and Leaf Marquee accredited farmer. Charlie is a first-generation farmer who manages Brockgammon on the north coast of Antrim, which is famous for its award-winning rose veal and goat burgers. He has been championing sustainability and the principle of forward-thinking farming since 2012. The farm is a mixed system aiming to demonstrate high welfare standards, environmental stewardship, resilience and profitability. Charlie is also a steering group member of the Nature-Friendly Farming Network and winner of Slow Food Person of the Year 2019. Brockgammon have amassed a number of awards, including the 2019 Irish Food Writers Guild Environmental Award and a number of British Street Food Awards. Simon and Charlie will speak for around 25 minutes with 10 minutes for questions. Everyone, please ask questions through the chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll read a few of them out to the panelists afterwards. So with that, I'll hand over to Simon, who'll take us off from here. Thank you, Simon.
Good morning. I suppose the first thing that I've been asked to do is just give a little bit of a background to who are the Nature Friendly Farming Network. So my first slide, I think, please, is the photo. Next slide, please. So NFFN are a farmer-led organisation established in 2017. All members are passionate about sustainable, nature-friendly farming, but also have an acute understanding of the current challenges of agriculture. The group aim to demonstrate the value of nature-friendly farming to other farmers, the public and policy makers across the UK, to highlight that with the right support, farming can deliver for nature, climate, food production, and many other elements as well. suppose we believe that the organisation fills a niche role. We have a number of very strong farming organisations who are clearly experts in farming. Also environmental organisations who clearly have the environment at the forefront of their mind. But I suppose we see Nature Friendly Farming Network as I suppose a bridge between those two elements, and the opportunity to get everybody around the one table. We currently represent over 400 farming members in Northern Ireland, and that's done through our own country steering group, our Northern Ireland Steering Group. And that steering group in Northern Ireland consists of farmers from a range of sectors and farm sizes, including myself and Charlie, who you'll hear from shortly. The next slide is, I suppose, some of the issues, or many of the issues in this slide will be well known to most of you. There are numerous challenges obviously facing both farming and the environment, such as climate change and biodiversity loss, farm incomes and profitability, and then thrown into that mix you've got Brexit, the lack of certainty around how things will pan out, and not to mention obviously COVID-19. However, if the last number of months has shown us anything, it's that our local food system can step up in a crisis, and I hope that it's shown just how important it is to secure and protect a thriving and diverse agri-food sector in this area. And hopefully, COVID-19 has created as much opportunity for our sector as it has identified the threats. Next slide is really, I suppose, an overview of the many different benefits nature-friendly farming can offer the public if supported in the right way. We've got community engagement, air quality, carbon sequestration, and I suppose our soils and habitats can help store and sequester huge amounts of carbon. We also provide a home for nature through the creation and management of our habitats in the right way. We safeguard long-term future security through our natural capital, and we also improve air, water and soil quality through better understanding, measurement and strategic use of natural and managed habitat. And all encompassing, we're focused on producing high quality, sustainable food. So covering many areas through our systems. On to my own farm and business. Acton House Farm, we're on the Armagh Down border, just at Points Pass, between Newry and Portadown, effectively. The Newry Canal runs right through us, and we've a large footfall of walkers, etc., who cover a large area of our farm. So I think in terms of this opening slide, this quote, I suppose, sums up our ethos. Our land is our priority. We need to not only add value to it over time so that future generations can not only make a living, but provide for a growing global population, whilst also ensuring long-term health of the environment and a vibrant community within which we live to boot. So again, it's covering that sort of wide variety of areas. And I suppose I see myself first and foremost as a producer, providing and provider of food ingredients. However, it's important to me that this is produced in a sustainable and ethical manner. And this is essentially what I see as my purpose as I suppose the current custodian or steward of Acton House Farm. And in terms of that quote, we don't inherit this land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. I think that purpose is really at the core of what we do day to day. Next slide is I suppose a little bit about what we do and how we try and make nature mean business, essentially, and we try and not only integrate and align some of our environmental stewardship with our production end, and I suppose ultimately the need for profitability to ensure long-term sustainability not only of the farm business but also of our environment. So Soils are a big focus for me. I believe if we keep our soils right and we look after them, many other elements will follow. To that end, it's really important to know what's going on under our feet. We carry out soil analysis, which I think was maybe another one part of it there. So soil analysis annually, we run all our ground in sort of 3-year cycles, trying to include organic matter in that as well, analysis so that we get a broad idea of what's going on within our soil. Field mapping, we take care around compaction, and we also produce our own green waste compost through a composting facility that we have on farm, and that in turn helps us to improve our organic matter, sequester carbon, and not always reduction of inputs, but more targeted use of any inputs that we have, and I suppose through integrated pest management and targeted use of nutrients, we aim to, I suppose, improve our profitability as well. Next slide is I suppose around our community engagement, and I think this is a very important leg of our strategy going forward. Community engagement, I feel, is very important and hugely underrated if our industry wants to really market and sell the positive contribution that agriculture brings to the rural economy, particularly looking towards the future and the increased scrutiny that farm support will be under from the public. We have a number of initiatives that we run throughout the year. This photo is Open Farm Weekend, which we host annually. This year we're taking part this weekend. It'll be virtual, which will be interesting, but I think the opportunity there is that we can hopefully spread the net wider and maybe have a more diverse network of people hopefully accessing that without having to travel, and perhaps we can get the word a little bit wider. We also have, you'll see that those other photos are a community bird watch dawn walk that we do every year. Sorry, just back one. Thanks. Which we do every year, and we supply compost boxes to the village as well. So I suppose it's engaging with our community. The story I often tell: 40 years ago, a farm of our size would have had 10, 12, or possibly more people employed. We now have 3 full-time staff. What that means, I suppose, is in the past we'd have had 10 or 12 families being supported, 10 or 12 people coming home every evening and telling the story about what's going on the farm. That no longer happens. So these initiatives give us the opportunity to engage with our local community and help them to understand not only what we do, but why we do it, and where their food comes from. And I think, as I said earlier, we really do need to improve our engagement, and that's not just farmers taking to social media. I believe it needs to be a collaborative, planned out, focused initiative across the entire agri-food sector. On to my next slide around supply chain, and again, this is an area that we work really hard on. We've been involved in environmental initiatives for almost 20 years now, and I suppose the mindset has always been to try and use those to add value to the produce that we produce, to have a completely integrated system. So we aim to develop as many local supply chains as possible. Whites, as you can see here, is 5 miles away from us. This is a relationship that we're really proud of, to have a food product in our oats which we can produce and sell into the mills so close to us, and be really integrated into that supply chain is a big plus. And obviously the flagship, and we're in leaf, which means we produce our oats to a higher level of environmental stewardship, which can then be marketed and a premium received for that. And Whites work really hard to market that product on our behalf as growers. But we also look at, I suppose, other supply chain interventions that we can do. So I have a local livestock farmer 3 miles away who collects grain for me throughout the year. This is a really simple, very simple. This relationship is as simple as saving on transport costs and merchant commission, but it allows us to both benefit, I suppose, from that on our doorstep. And I think when we talk a lot about the future, and you know, people talk sometimes about mixed farming being the future. Well, I don't necessarily agree. I feel that I do what I do well. I grow grain, and he grows pigs well. So why can we not integrate and be much more aligned and be stronger together, while still doing what we each do well, but having more of an integrated community than necessarily a mixed farming system within the one farm gate. I suppose some of the habitats that we have on farm, we're currently in the environmental farming scheme wider, and as I said earlier, having previously been in schemes for almost 20 years, the last version being the NI Northern Ireland Countryside Management Scheme. So here we have some pollen and nectar mix. I suppose we try to incorporate all of our habitats into the sort of strategic areas of the land, not necessarily unproductive, but for example, pollen and nectar, we have rough grass margins also, wild bird cover, and also some woodland. But I suppose strategically placed, providing ecosystem services such as predatory insects, pollinators. Our rough grass margins are providing buffers to each of our fields. So they're working in amongst the production system all the time. I guess in terms of those habitats, we do try to look at results. We're recording, RSPB have carried out a number of surveys for us. We've had breeding lapwings on the farm. Our community walks also help us to get results from, or record results from what we do. But I do feel going forward that it's important that any future schemes should most certainly have a results based. In the production end of my business, we work all year round to be measured by yield, and we can clearly gauge success and make improvements on the back of that. I think we need more focus on gauging the success from our environmental initiatives and habitats, and it's been great to work with some of the other organisations to try and measure that, but I think there's much more that we can do to that end. Moving on to my final slide, and if we just pull it all up, please. There's maybe 3 points on it. I think this slide sadly focuses on how out of step the current schemes are with what's required to meet the environmental challenges that we have ahead. And I feel, unfortunately, the current system has been unable to address the issues facing farming and the environment at present. And there's been a clear and marked reduction in investment given to nature-friendly farming practices in Northern Ireland from NICMS into the environmental farming system, environmental farming scheme. You'll see here we have my total habitat through the NICMS was up to 81 hectares, and I really from 2012 up to 2018 we really built on that. However, when we entered the environmental farming scheme, that dropped markedly down to 5.5 hectares. Not because I in any way wanted to reduce that, quite the opposite. I was growing it and growing a market around that through you know, our oats and our niche markets that we had there. But the reason for that drop sadly was down to a capping system that was introduced. Still can't quite get my head around that one. You'll see that the funding is capped at £4,000 per annum. The rollout of that effectively means that the maximum farm size that can be supported under that scheme is almost 82 hectares. I'm over 400 hectares, so I can't quite understand why the environment stops part of the way through my farm and then potentially starts again at my neighbour. As far as I'm concerned, the environment is all around us, and if I want to pursue those initiatives, I shouldn't be stopped with a cap. And so I suppose science has demonstrated that at least 10% of the farm should be managed for nature and habitat, and under the environmental farming scheme, I'm able to do this now. Hopefully future schemes will allow the minimum requirements for nature to be met, and allow me to continue to develop the markets that are there and available, and I suppose through the oats that I grow, the premium that I receive is nowhere near enough to cover what it costs to establish, maintain, and remove habitats from mainstream production. So future schemes really need to allow me to build on this, and I think that will be really important in delivering a range of national and international commitments to deliver a sustainable future in the long term. Thanks for your time. I possibly run a little bit over, Charlie, but I can now hand over to you to give us your perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. It means I don't have to talk as long. So my name is Charlie Cole. I'm from Brockgammon Farm. We're a small family farm on 50 acres. It was bought by my mum and dad in the right of that picture. They wanted to live the good life and bought the farm and built an eco house. And I suppose that environmental ethos has stayed with us as we've built the business. And then on the left is my wife Becky, who's come on board as well, and she runs a lot of the digital side of things. Nick, and obviously Rupert and Toby are also in the picture. Next slide, please. So when I came home to the farm, back please, we set up a business working with kid goats and rose veal. So the kid goats and rose veal are basically byproducts from the dairy industry. They are food waste before it's even made it into the food system. Unfortunately for the kid goats, there is no market, or was no market for male goats. And for the bull calves, there is obviously an export market and a small amount of bull beef as well. And really, I suppose this struck a chord for us because a lot of these animals were being put down or being live exported. And, in a time when we're questioning global food security and food waste, here was 50% of protein, I suppose, being born onto a dairy farm was deemed to have no market. Yet, culturally, that was the issue. Whereas if you look in the bigger world, there are plenty of people out there who do eat these products, and they are fantastic products as well. So we felt that we could really make a difference for them, and so started rearing them. Next slide, please. So in this process, basically, the forward-thinking farming is our slogan, and we've always tried to strive to be as best as we can. And in doing so, we started off barn rearing the animals because they are, I suppose we run an orphanage, and they are milk fed and they have a high nutritional requirement. We feed a lot of cereal to replace the milk that they would be getting at that young age. And we thought, right, how can we do this better? And I looked at the goats, and goats are traditionally browsers. They like to climb a tree, and they like to eat the more sort of herbal woody species. And this got me looking into herbal lays. And the more I got into herbal lays, the more I got addicted to the farming bug. But what you see here is a grazing full-year herbal lay. It's got sort of 20 or 14 different varieties of grass in it. And these grasses, they all have amazing natural properties. They're naturally anthelmintic. It's full of red and white clover, which means it's sort of a self-fertilizing field as well. So I don't need to use nitrogen fertilizer. It's also got very deep rooting varieties like chicory. And not only does that mean that it's drought resistant, but the deep roots means that it's got a better water holding capacity as well. And we've basically been working this with a mob grazing. So the goats go in a large volume onto a small patch of land. And what this does is it allows you to build up a very tall grass cover, and then you get very deep roots underneath. Now, when you eat those off, you get a lot of carbon root dieback in the soil, and so you get a lot of carbon being stored. It also means that you get a sort of mosaic effect across the field. You can see from the Google Maps picture. Those are all different levels of grass height throughout the sward. And that means you get a lot of flowering throughout the sward as well, which benefits pollinators. So you've got, in that picture there, you've got the blue of the chicory and the white clovers there. There's no red clover in the shot, but the bird's foot trefoil has come up with these beautiful yellow flowers today as well. So next slide, please. So as I got into the herbal lays, I discovered that actually it was a really, really good way of building soil fertility and conditioning soil. And because our livestock have a high grain requirement, I thought, right, how can I minimize my impact on the environment with bought-in feeds? Can I look at producing our own? We also have a farm shop on site. So, you know, the sort of integrated pest management side says, right, grow a brassica break. But because we're rearing kid goats and young bull calves, they couldn't graze a brassica rape over the winter months. You know, they need to come inside in the winter months. So I said, right, let's set about growing vegetables for our farm shop as our brassica break. So that has been going very well. We've got 2 acres now in rotation. And this is our second year of doing it. Lots of lessons learned, but it's keeping our customers in the shop very happy. And on the back of that, we're now trying some combi crops. But this is our first year, and the picture in the field doesn't look very good. So as Simon says, maybe I should be partnering with professionals in that field and curve. So next slide, please. So in between all of this, we're also integrating cover crops where we can. And this brings in a new aspect to our business, which is pigs. We are basically using the pigs to plow the land as we go through. And also what people don't realize with vegetables is if you harvest a cabbage, your heart is maybe worth, say, 50% of the yield of that plant. But then you're left with a lot of roughage that you chop off a cabbage, so the outer leaves, and that forms the other 50%. So we're using the pigs to cycle through the rest of the vegetables that we have left on the farm. We also have pockets of woodland that we planted in the past that they go through. Next slide, please. And why are we doing this? I suppose, as Simon said, it's supply chain value. We're a much smaller scale. We work directly with our customer on a day-to-day basis, but we are being presented with these questions at the checkout, at the till all the time. You know, customers are demanding high nature-friendly farming. It's what they want to see. It's what they want to eat. They realize that there is not only environmental benefits, but there's also health benefits. And this is what people are asking for. Next slide, please. Now, the way we pay for it all is by adding value. We're in a very lucky position where with the last rural development program, we were able to build a butchery, which is in the back of that picture. And then in the forefront there is our new farm shop as well. This means that we can really add value to our products and we can deliver on those environmental benefits that people want by, you know, using that added value to pay for it. I suppose the other benefit that we've really seen, and it's been highlighted by COVID, is that it has also given us a huge amount of resilience. You know, being a small team and with these facilities, we're very dynamic. So when coronavirus hit, we traditionally always did farmers markets. All of those farmers markets were cancelled. And we were able to, in a very short space of time, to shift and direct all of our produce online, offering a box scheme. but also offering a click and collect service where our customers, rather than coming to the farm shop, they were able to purchase through the shop online and then come to the shop literally just to collect. And it's definitely, it's that resilience that has been of benefit to us. Brexit will be the next one to negotiate. And for us, it'll be particularly difficult because Northern Ireland is a very small marketplace. You know, we're not densely populated. So we do rely as a small business on a lot of cross-border business. And, you know, one of our farmers markets is in Dublin and a lot of our meat boxes will be heading into the Republic. So it will be interesting to see whether we can be resilient enough to overcome that challenge, but who knows, because we don't know what the line is that we've got to work with. Next slide, please. In terms of nature on the farm, we've been able to use the environmental farming scheme recently. We've done a lot of riparian fencing along the farm, and we've done more tree planting as well across the site. It has been beneficial and we can't fault it, but we do feel it could have gone further. Next slide, please. We were in the old countryside management scheme, and this patch of land on the left-hand side is species-rich grassland. Now, this falls into Tier 3 land. That means that we're very low on the priority for getting an area-based payment. Under the countryside management scheme, we were paid to maintain this species-rich grassland, but under the new scheme, we aren't paid. Now, as you can see on the right, this is full of Devilbit scabious. We have a huge number of wild orchids through it as well, but when I took this picture, it was the wrong time of year. We are 2 miles from one of the key marsh fritillary breeding sites. The value that this land has is huge from an environmental perspective, but from a farm business, it's low value. And if we're to preserve that, you know, there needs to be some form of payment for that value. That land is one slurry tanker away from being grass, which would be of huge benefit to economic business, but I want to preserve that environmental value because it is gorgeous, it is pristine, and there is so little of that left in Ireland. But yet I am falling short of current environmental farming scheme to be accredited. And really, you know, a results-based system would be looking at that and saying, on our farm, yes, we can do riparian fencing, yes, we can plant trees, but surely that is the highest priority habitats that we should be protecting. And it's weird that under the wider scheme, I can receive funding, but under the higher scheme, which is surely more important, I can't get funding to protect that. Next slide, please. In terms of the Ag Bill, making it happen. So yeah, as we said, we really do need farming policies that put nature-friendly farming at the heart of Northern Ireland's food and farming system. And that means putting money for results-based payments. The payments should encompass future agricultural and food policies. It should also include the social aspect and rural development programs, enabling people to build butcheries and farm shops and reconnect and create a thriving rural system to enable these sort of businesses to survive. Farmers should be fully supported to help meet these challenges. This will require long-term public investment alongside well-designed support schemes. And this is true, you know, we have that high nature value, species-rich grassland, but for that to be maintained, it has to be funded. That environmental value has to be considered. We do have the Northern Ireland Future Agricultural Policy Framework. It has sort of stalled. We want to see that progressing, and we sort of need to see some concept of where we're heading. We do have an amendment that's being discussed in the Ag Bill, so hopefully we'll wait and see whether that puts something in statute for Northern Ireland, but time will tell. Next slide, please. Safeguarding our future. We remain concerned that future trade deals could undercut the high standards set by UK farmers. We must agree trade deals with high standards. This will mean that UK farmers who manage their land in a sustainable way, sequestering carbon and benefiting, will be championed and supported. If not, we risk being undermined by produce produced at lower animal welfare and environmental standards than that which we currently expect and enjoy. We do have the Trading and Standards Commission, which has recently been set up to review any trade deals. But does this have enough bite? Is it too late? Because by the time the Ag Bill goes through, maybe we're going to have some of these trade deals already in place. It is with the Lords at the moment, so all I can do is ask you to tug on the sleeve of your local Lord and maybe put in a word for environmental farming, and maybe we can convince someone to change the process. But definitely we can't be undercutting our good work here by importing something from elsewhere. That will not provide the payment for environmental farming. Next slide, please. So Simon and I have demonstrated what can be done, as have our other nature-friendly farming colleagues. But now it's really up to policy to change, to really support the wider sector to drive change on a much larger scale to support nature. Next slide, please. This is the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Please join if you're a supporting member or a member of the public or farmer and help drive change for a more nature-friendly farming system. Any questions?
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. That was brilliant. And thank you, Simon, as well. Really inspiring talk. And it's really interesting to see what both of you are doing. And obviously, we want to see more of that within the countryside as well. You've both demonstrated some of the obstacles to making that happen too, and some of the difficulties that you guys have faced in terms of delivering those outcomes and delivering sustainable farming. I suppose, just to touch on it as well, for people asking questions, there was a question coming in about the chat box. If everyone could use the Q&A box just along the bottom of the screen, because the chat's not working at the moment. One of the things I wanted to touch on, you've spoken about climate and how farming can provide nature-based solutions for that challenge. And it's obviously becoming further and further up the agenda at the moment. And what role do you think nature-friendly farming can play in achieving this? And would there be opportunities for farmers to help deliver on climate commitments? And how do you see that?
I suppose I'll take that one if you like, Charlie. I think it's not. Well, there is a role. I think it's critical that there's a role, and it's critical that the farming system steps up to that plate. I mean, I heard some of the minister's comments last week on this, and I suppose I feel to an extent, because we seem to have gone from sort of climate change to climate crisis to climate emergency very quickly, and sometimes that rhetoric isn't always that helpful. But I think we can't ignore that there are issues that have to be dealt with. So, in terms of what we can do, obviously, some of the schemes that we have will contribute, but I think there must be much more dynamic, much more investment into those, and encourage more farmers as opposed to step up to those initiatives. Within that, I guess it's back to, we both spoke a bit about supply chain, but can we be more effective at integrating our farming system, such as sharing our resources, nutrients from an intensive farm for environmental mitigation on maybe a less intensive farm. Other, I suppose, things that I've looked at, even things like private investment into carbon sequestration, that has to have a value potentially in the future with maybe logistics companies or private companies who have carbon offsetting that they need to achieve. So I suppose that's around innovation. It's around sort of being more dynamic about what we look at, and I guess that's an opportunity that Northern Ireland has, given that yes, we might be small, but surely we can be more dynamic on that front. And I suppose critically, maybe aligning the message a little bit better as well. I think we're often not that great at promoting some of the good things that we do as farmers, and I think we probably need to get a lot more proactive at that, and actually across the industry being much more aligned in terms of the messages that we have, and focusing on the goods that we're not constantly, I suppose, hearing the sort of potential panic wording that's used. And if we can get onto that more aligned trajectory, then we can work together to hopefully mitigate what's ahead of us, because ultimately we all, as farmers and as land stewards, want to protect the resource that we have for the future.
Perfect, thank you. Charlie, do you have anything to add on top of that? Or
I suppose, the big word is carbon, and we have to remember that it's a carbon cycle. Farming is very much involved in that cyclical nature, and it's not as heavily dependent on that more extractive process. And I think that's where it gets misaligned maybe in the global press. There's a lot of figures and facts that are thrown around, but they don't consider the fact that farming operates in that cycle, whereas there are a lot more exploitive industries. We can farm in a way that builds topsoil that eventually then turns into the oil and gas reserves that are stored deep underground. And by extracting those more longer term stores, we are releasing a lot heavier amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. Whereas farming can be done in a more cyclical, slow-paced sort of form. In terms of the farm in regards to everyday climate action measures, yes, farming is natural, it is nature. So we have huge opportunities in regards to environmental services that Simon was hinting at there, about woodlands, streams, hedgerows, pollinators. On that level, we can make a huge difference. We already do make a huge difference. We could definitely do more, but again, if that is deducting from an economic business perspective, then that will have to be paid for. That environmental benefit would have to be supplemented somehow. But that cost is a cost that needs to be burdened by society, because we're all in it together. So
definitely, no, perfect. Thank you both. Just a few questions coming in from other people in the chat. So there's one in relation to future schemes. There's a couple of those. So the first one is, would you agree that the current EFS is too top down, with not enough input from farmers or flexibility to adapt to agri-environment schemes to particular needs of each farm? And there's another one related to that as well. So do you see bespoke farm environment plans as a potential framework to support environmentally based outcome delivery for Northern Ireland?
I probably spoke a little bit about my concerns on EFS, so I would probably say that absolutely it needs more farmer input. I also think that look, EFS, I think, is contributing to an extent, but is there much more it can do? I would say yes, and I think more investment and more adaptable investment in that front. So, sorry, I didn't just pick up the second part of that, Phil, or maybe Charlie wants to leave with the second part of your question.
The second part was so bespoke farm environment plans as a framework to support the delivery of these outcomes in Northern Ireland and across the UK as well, and to be able to track your progress and measure those outcomes too.
I suppose that's what the last webinar really delved into, which was, in the Republic of Ireland, they've got, was it 23 different bespoke systems that they were trialing to create a new system for the new CAP reform in the Republic. Does it work? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. We'll know, after something's been established, but I think it's definitely worth trialing. I think a system that engages with the farmers more and is results-based rather than forced upon a farmer is going to be much more beneficial, and it's going to have a lot more farmer engagement. But yeah, I can't say whether something's going to work or not going to work. It has to be trialed, and I think what they've done in the South has been a great stepping stone to try a different style of system. Is that on?
I think it's really important, and I think I touched on it in my comments, just that we do look at ways that we can be gauged on success. I think not only is it good for the farmer to understand, you know, how he's doing and how his input and how his efforts are turning out. I mean, as I say, we do it day and daily with yield or with performance in our cattle. So we should be able to do it, I think, in our environment. But the second piece of that is around how we then promote what we're doing and how we can actually feed into that science argument and actually demonstrate that what we're doing is effective, and that will help us promote the good that we're doing.
Yeah, I suppose anything that is based on natural capital would have to be bespoke for each farmer, because in order for you to be able to draw up a plan or an assessment of their natural capital, that, you know, it will be bespoke. You will have to visit each farm to discover what each farm is delivering, because they could be achieving results through different methods. So, you know, it will have to be bespoke.
Yeah, and a one-size-fits-all approach isn't essentially going to deliver those outcomes that you want. I'll just touch on one last question. Thank you, everyone, for filling in, and sorry we can't answer all of them. So one of the questions is, surely farming for nature costs money with land taken out of production, or do these areas contribute to the economic value of the farm in their own right?
Yes, absolutely. It does, which is why support is needed. And yes, look, I think we want the supply chain to contribute and to pay for that, but we're not at that stage yet. So I think we need investment, we need support, and ultimately we want to use that to help in the background, to help develop our supply chain and help sell, you know, our environmental credentials in more innovative ways. But certainly, as we stand, that land that's coming out of production, of course, needs to be recognised and has an economic value in displacement alone.
Brilliant, thank you. No, thanks again both to you. Brilliant presentation and a great demonstration of what can be done and what needs to be done moving forward as well. With that, we'll move on to Matt. So with this, you've touched on investment and investment required, and there needs to be a lot more. And this would be a central element of a future policy, hopefully in the future. But one of the things that's going to be asked around that is how much will it cost and how will we pay for those outcomes? And we've touched on it a little bit, but our next speaker will seek to answer these questions whilst showcasing the value that this type of investment can deliver as part of a green recovery in Northern Ireland. So with that, I'd like to give a big welcome to Matt Rayment, who is an economist with 30 years experience in the appraisal and evaluation of public policy, with a particular interest in biodiversity and rural land management. Much of his work is focused on the costs, benefits and financing of biodiversity, conservation and management of the rural environment. He recently advised DEFRA on payment methodologies for the new environmental land management scheme in England. In 2017 and 2019, he undertook two major studies for the RSPB, the National Trust and the Wildlife Trust to assess the costs of meeting environmental land management priorities in the UK and to explore options for payment mechanisms for environmental land management. He has completed numerous policy studies and evaluations for the European Commission, DEFRA, devolved administrations, nature conservation agencies and international bodies. Currently an independent consultant, Matt was consulting director at ICF until 2017, and before that, principal consultant at GHK Consulting. He was also previously head of economics at the RSPB. So Matt, over to you. 25 minutes for a presentation, and then we'll touch on some questions afterwards, but feel free to take it away from now.
Thanks, Phil. Can you see my screen? Can you see my slideshow?
Yep, that looks good. Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. I've been asked to talk about paying for public goods in a green recovery through environmental land management. And I'm going to address three questions. Firstly, what will it cost to meet Northern Ireland's priorities for environmental land management? Secondly, how should we pay for the public goods from environmental land management? And thirdly, how could paying for public goods contribute to post-COVID-19 recovery? So first question, what will it cost? And I'm going to talk about some work that I've been doing with the RSPB, the National Trust and the Wildlife Trusts to assess the financial needs for meeting priorities from environmental land management across the UK. And we built a model to assess this. So we quantified what there is across the UK in terms of existing land uses, priority habitats and features across the farmed landscape, defined the needs in terms of management of that land in order to meet environmental priorities for biodiversity, for climate, for water quality, and so on, and quantified that in terms of numbers of hectares of land, kilometers of linear features, and so on. Identified unit costs that we could use to assess the costs of managing that land, meeting those priorities, and then use that to estimate overall financial needs at national level and across the 4 countries. And so to do that, we built a library of existing unit costs from existing land management schemes, but we also built a cost model which enabled us to assess how costs would change in response to changes in crop prices, in livestock prices, labour, fuel costs, etc. And thought also about the costs of actually maintaining land in use if we remove cap subsidies. So it's all based on a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet model, detailing the different elements I've talked about, and we did an initial assessment in 2017 and an update in 2019, which updated the estimates in relation to the different cost drivers, but also looked at some other aspects such as the costs of providing advice to support environmental land management, the costs of securing farming systems which would be vulnerable to the removal of subsidies, particularly Pillar 1 subsidies, because clearly if farms are going to go out of business, then that's going to jeopardize the delivery of public goods. And also looked at how we reward long-term commitments for habitat management, creation and restoration of habitats in particular, given that that's not going to be adequately covered by short-term agri-environment schemes. And there are a number of challenges in doing that in terms of quantifying what needs to be done. So in some cases, government objectives and targets aren't sort of fully specified or quantified. There are gaps in terms of data. We had to allow for overlaps in land management needs, given that many land management practices can meet multiple environmental objectives. And as I say, we also thought about effects of the changing subsidy regime overall and what that meant for the delivery of public goods in future. And these are estimates of the financial needs that we came up with through that exercise. So we estimate that we need to spend about £2.9 billion across the UK to fully meet our environmental land management priorities. And these are the existing stated priorities of government in relation to different environmental objectives. A large amount of that relates to maintenance, restoration, and creation of priority habitats, and that includes large areas of land which are currently in woodland, blanket bog, heather moorland, as well as wetlands and the coast. Large expenditures also on boundary features, hedgerows and walls and so on, the historic environment, management of arable land to meet priorities for biodiversity and resource protection, grassland, organic farmland, etc. And we've also, as I say, estimated costs of advice and securing high nature value vulnerable farming systems. And in Northern Ireland, the estimate is £188 million required to be spent per year for the next 10 years. And a breakdown of those figures is given in that table. And as I say, the model allows us to assess effects of changes in cost drivers, so we can look at how costs vary if the price of arable crops increases, livestock prices rise or fall, labour costs, and so on. So in conclusion from that strand of the work, we've built a model that enables us to quantify environmental land management needs and estimate the costs of meeting those needs. We estimate that we need to spend £188 million per year in Northern Ireland, 2.9 billion in the UK. So that's a good chunk of the current CAP budget. Clearly also delivering public goods depends on maintaining viable farming businesses. So we've started to factor that into the analysis. The estimates are conservative because they're based on current average income forgone. If we actually want to achieve very high rates of uptake of environmental schemes, we need to increase the payments in some cases. So there are significant financial needs, but also huge benefits, and a number of studies demonstrate good benefit cost ratios from investing in land management. It'll help to deliver our commitments for in relation to climate change, deliver really valuable ecosystem services in terms of protecting water, protecting us from flooding, etc., as well as providing valuable benefits that the public will benefit from. And obviously, this is our assessment based on needs that the level of costs and benefits clearly depend on the level of ambition. Second question: how should we pay for public goods from environmental land management? And Charlie touched on this, talking about results-based payments, for example. Currently, we make agri-environment payments for activities, and we prescribe particular activities and calculate the payment rates based on the costs incurred and income forgone as required by EU rules. There have been a number of criticisms of the current system. It can be inflexible and bureaucratic. There are a lot of rules that need to be followed. It doesn't incentivize greater environmental outcomes because you basically qualify for payment if you deliver a certain required level of activity, but don't get paid more beyond that. And critics also argue that it doesn't reward local knowledge and encourage innovation among farmers and land managers. So there's interest in finding new ways of setting payments to give greater flexibility and to incentivize environmental improvements. And when we think about how we pay, there are two main variables. First is what we pay for, the basis for the payment itself, whether we pay for activities or whether we pay for results in some way. And secondly, the methods we use to actually calculate the payment rates, whether they're based on costs and income forgone, or whether we also reflect the value of the benefits delivered, or we can use certain market-based approaches such as reverse auctions to find prices which are acceptable to buyers and sellers. And illustrate some of the options in this slide, which shows that we can think about land management in terms of activities such as restoration of a peatland, which then deliver results for the environment. And we can define those at different levels. So what I've called here first level outcomes in terms of improving the condition of natural capital. So we can think about improving the condition of peatland in terms of the wetness, vegetation cover, structure and composition, and that itself then delivers environmental public goods or ecosystem services which provide benefits for the public, such as carbon storage, water quality, landscape, populations of species, and so on. And we can set the payments based on the prescribed activities, on the condition of the restored peatland, or on the actual public services that delivers in terms of carbon storage and so on, providing we can measure those. And we can set the payments in different ways, so we can look at the costs of delivering the activities, or we could try to reflect the value of the benefits in terms of the value of carbon stored in setting the payments. And there are pros and cons in each of these approaches. So paying for activities is obviously a tried and tested approach. We've got a lot of experience over the years. We have a growing knowledge of what works through evaluation. It's relatively easy for farmers and land managers to understand if there are clear rules. It's certain about levels of payment because if you follow the rules and deliver what's asked, you get the payment. And that also provides budgetary certainty for the authorities, and the payments are relatively straightforward to calculate. On the downside, as I've said, it's been criticised for being inflexible and bureaucratic, based on a lot of rules. National rules may not reflect local conditions or knowledge. There's no incentive to go beyond the minimum that you need to do to qualify for the payment or to try new things. It's not always easy to monitor compliance. If you think about rules on things like fertilizer applications, it can be actually quite difficult to check that the rules are being followed. And the system as a whole has failed to stop environmental problems such as wildlife declines and persistent problems with water quality and so on. Is that because it hasn't been applied widely enough or at large enough scale? That's probably a big part of it, but some question about whether it's working as well. So if we think as an alternative, we can pay for results, which gives us gives greater freedom and flexibility for land managers to try new things, to manage land in ways that will deliver results, and to be rewarded for those results without being told exactly what to do. So it can incentivize better environmental outcomes, and pilots have shown that this actually has happened in places like the Burren. So it can encourage innovation and new approaches, reward local knowledge, encourages buy-in because farmers will get involved in trying to work out how they can deliver better results for the environment. And sometimes it can be easier to monitor results and actions. So if you think you can look at a meadow and look at the condition of a meadow and pay on that basis, that can sometimes be easier than actually monitoring all the actions that were required to actually deliver that meadow. But there are also cons. Some of the disadvantages include that there can be uncertainty regarding levels of payments for land managers and authorities. They may be subject to uncertain weather events and things like that can affect environmental results and therefore payments. There may also be time lags which delay payments, particularly when you're talking about restoring habitats and features, which may take a while to deliver results. Some results may be beyond the direct influence of the land manager. If you think about things like water quality and and some of the actual public goods I talked about, rather than the direct condition of the land on the farm. And our ability to apply the approach is also limited by the ability to come up with robust indicators that we can actually use to measure these environmental changes. So that's the sort of basis for payment. In terms of how you calculate the payments, the income forgone and costs approach has some advantages in being tried and tested, can be applied in practice. It has relatively low budgetary cost, because you try to pay land managers just enough to sign them up. You can apply some flexibility to the approach through using supplements and targeting, etc., to actually achieve particular outcomes in particular places. It provides a good level of certainty as to the financial commitments, and it's also compatible with WTO rules. On the downside, it's been criticised for encouraging low-cost actions rather than those which deliver highest benefit. So obviously you can profit most from cost-based payments if you can deliver them at lower cost than the payment rate, and that can influence the distribution of payments. The payments which are based on a typical holding can overcompensate some and undercompensate others. They may not be sufficient to achieve the right levels of uptake to achieve environmental priorities, and it can offer little profit for the typical land manager, just covering costs. So it's been criticised for providing limited reward for delivering public goods of greatest value. So there's a case for including evidence of environmental values in the calculation of payments. And this is consistent with the natural capital approach. It encourages a focus on environmental services and their value. It can enhance the rewards from land management and incentivize the delivery of public goods. It encourages the choice and location of land management practices where they deliver greatest value to society rather than where they're just low cost. And it can help to provide private finance because it helps us to focus on the outcomes and their value, and therefore to attract buyers such as water companies, insurance companies, and so on, who benefit from these services. On the downside, it can be difficult to apply in practice because of gaps in evidence of benefits and their value. Some things are quite easy to value, such as carbon, because there are set prices, whereas others, such as landscape and flood management, can be very difficult to quantify and value in money terms. There are also geographical variations in the value of a lot of these services and difficulties in measuring marginal changes, which prevent challenges for setting payment rates. And another concern is there's a real risk that such an approach focused on value would really increase the cost of providing payments, because studies have shown that because of the benefit cost ratios, if you actually pay the value of the benefits rather than the costs of delivery, it could significantly increase payment rates and mean that you can buy less from the budget available. So there's also increasing interest in reverse auctions and other market-based approaches, and they can be used to help to set prices that are acceptable to both buyers and sellers by basically holding competitions and encouraging providers of environmental activities and services to bid to deliver them, and then selecting those bids on the basis of best value in terms of what's delivered relative to price. And that can help to overcome some of the problems of information. Sometimes the authorities don't know how much to pay, what benefits they're going to achieve, and so actually holding competitions like that can actually address some of those problems. And they have been shown to deliver good results in terms of cost effectiveness. And may allow some flexibility for land managers to vary their bids according to circumstances. Some of the disadvantages are that relate to the sort of scale at which they've been applied so far. So far they've been implemented on only a limited scale in the UK and Europe, usually to address specific local needs. Farmers and land managers are often concerned about that they involve high administrative and transaction costs because of the time needed to present bids to the authorities and to evaluate successful bids. They can also present challenges in allocating resources where there are different environmental outcomes. So it's simpler if you can easily quantify the benefits of bids using simple indicators. And they're unfamiliar to most land managers, so would require a process of learning and support to build confidence. So in conclusion, on alternative payment methodologies, the UK's departure from the EU provides a major opportunity to change the system of land management payments to focus on the delivery of public goods. The administrations in England and Wales have both signalled an intention to change the current methodology, at least to some extent, for calculating payments. And the Republic of Ireland also has experience of result-based payments, including through the pilot in the Burren, which has shown some promising results. The different methods, as I've said, each have their pros and cons, and I think it's unlikely that a single method will be best in all circumstances. So results-based payments show a lot of promise where, and could be applied more widely where we have good results-based indicators. There'd be merit in wider use of environmental values to inform payment setting, but I don't think it's likely to provide the main basis for calculating payments. And reverse auctions offer potential for wider application and can deliver benefits, especially in meeting specific priorities cost effectively. And I think there's potential to test them in one-off competitions and then to apply them more widely over time. And I think we can also consider a combination of these approaches, such as increasing the use of results-based supplements to add to payments for actions. And some schemes like the Burren scheme has involved both a action and results-based element. And my third question is, how could paying for public goods contribute to post-COVID-19 recovery? Clearly, COVID-19 has demonstrated the importance of nature to our lives and our health. And I think there's been a lot of thinking about how we can have a green recovery that creates jobs, gets the economy moving, while also maintaining and investing in natural capital and moving us towards our net zero carbon ambitions. And a lot of studies recently have shown the contribution that environmental investments, including renewables, energy efficiency, green transport systems, urban green infrastructure, can make to green recovery. And investments in nature also have an important role to play, including through investments in habitat creation and restoration, and in enhancing green infrastructure and access to green space in urban areas. Just focusing on habitats here, the land management costings work I spoke about earlier estimates financial needs for creation and restoration of habitats across the UK. And we estimate that we need to invest £21 million per year for 10 years in creation and restoration of habitats in Northern Ireland to meet environmental priorities. That includes restoration of peatlands, planting of new woodlands, and so on, and as well as wetlands, coastal, and other habitats. And we estimate this investment could create 300 full-time equivalent jobs directly across Northern Ireland over the course of that 10-year period, as well as another 300 jobs in the supply chain and through multiplier effects. And it will also support wider jobs through the tourism industry, while strengthening our natural capital, reducing carbon emissions, and delivering vital services for society and the economy. So in terms of my overall conclusions, I think we need to invest in environmental land management to deliver vital public goods and to meet priorities for our environment in Northern Ireland. Leaving the CAP gives us an opportunity to refocus public spending on environmental public goods and to explore new ways of paying for public goods to deliver best value for money. And investing in nature, both in rural and urban areas, will create jobs and has an important role to play in our economic recovery. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Matt. That was brilliant and really interesting. And I suppose there's a lot of questions to answer and a lot of paths we could potentially take in terms of choosing the options and choosing how to pay. As a first question from myself, you've touched on moving beyond costs incurred, income forgone, and I would be interested to find out in terms of what type of situations or landscapes you think that would be necessary to apply that, and others where it mightn't be the most appropriate means to adopt those payment methodologies.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. When we think about moving, well, there's a question of what we pay for, whether we're paying for actions or whether we're paying for results, and then how we calculate payments. And I think in terms of moving towards results-based payments, the key thing is whether we can actually measure in a robust way and in a way that is understood and widely recognized to land managers, whether we can pay for those environmental improvements, whether we can measure them using appropriate indicators. So the pilots, the results-based approach has been piloted with some promise in parts of England and Republic of Ireland, and where we can measure things like the condition of a grassland, of a hay meadow. In the English pilot has involved counting numbers of species in upland hay meadows, for example, and that's provided quite a good way of measuring improvements in the environmental outcome. It's got farmers and land managers involved in actually assessing those improvements, and it's provided a good basis for payments and for encouraging improvements in condition over time. So that's worked quite well. When we think about actions which are designed to improve water quality, for example, it can be much more difficult to measure the contribution of what's being delivered to the final environmental outcome. So it's much harder to design those things to be measured and used for the as a basis for payments. But we're learning all the time. So I think we can apply results-based approaches in some cases and try to apply them more widely over time, and that offers promise.
Thank you. Question coming through here in terms of the potential for private investment as well. So you touched on it with natural capital values and using them. So there's a question coming through from a farmer. So if I owned 500 hectares of intact upland peatland, would you ever see a situation where it may be more economically beneficial to stop taking farming subsidies, basic payment, environmental, and trade in carbon credits on the open market?
It's quite possible that the full value of that carbon is actually, could be more than the value of the actual food produced on the land in a lot of cases, because some of these systems are very valuable in terms of environmental services. What I'd like to see is the potential to be rewarded for everything. So if you can continue farming at low intensity, be paid for improvements in water quality by a water company, be paid on carbon markets for trading in carbon credits, and be paid by the taxpayer for producing more for biodiversity, then you're actually, that's reflecting the multifunctionality of the system and the wide range of possibilities for reward. And I think, if we think along these lines and we think more about these different values, there's more potential to do that than expecting, than under the current system, the government to foot the whole bill.
And do you think there's, I suppose, what do you think needs to happen to try and stimulate that private investment in land management, I suppose, from a policy perspective, but also in terms of engaging with people or businesses that would have a stake in that as well?
Well, I think we need to do more to understand the value of these different services and to understand who might be prepared to pay for them. And if we take that approach, and if we think more about the value of these different services, it can offer new opportunities. And I think the approach we've adopted, where everything's been based on cost, and it's been delivered through agri-environment schemes, which set one area-based payment for actions, hasn't necessarily encouraged these different potential buyers to come on board. But it needs a process of facilitation as well, where the government actually actively pursues the agenda and tries to get different buyers on board, and to some extent it requires the government to step back and say it's not going to pay for these things which could be delivered by the market. So it requires quite a bold and proactive approach to really make it work, I think.
Okay, thank you. That's fascinating. We've got another question coming in here in terms of the overall calculations for NI and how they potentially could be distributed and where they'd be distributed to. So the point is 180 million is nearly 2/3 of our current CAP budget. And there's a question being asked as, would this not be directed to a relatively small portion of the land area, leaving an unsustainably amount of support for a large number of farms?
No, I don't think so. I think, I mean, it is quite a wide land area. If we think of all the woodlands, heather, moorland, bogs, and other habitats, but also, we've factored in the costs of meeting land management priorities across arable land quite widely and across kind of non-priority habitat grasslands, so across improved grassland areas as well. So it applies to most of the land of Northern Ireland effectively. Obviously, it involves a shift away from the existing direct payment scheme. But again, we've also factored in where farms would be vulnerable to shifting payments, and where, you know, in a lot of cases, particularly in vulnerable upland farms, if you took the direct subsidies away, that could actually threaten the existence and the continuation of some of these systems. So we've factored in calculations about, you know, where we need to maintain the system in order to continue to enjoy the public goods from the system. But as you say, it's a good chunk of a cap budget. I mean, there would hopefully be more left for other things in terms of diversification and rural development and other priorities for the farming sector. But the analysis is based on buying public goods rather than on just providing direct payments to farmers.
And I think that's an important point, and it's been touched on, I suppose, by Simon and Charlie in terms of the support to build suitable infrastructure on the farm in terms of getting access to markets or engaging with the communities and things in those areas too. So yeah, I think it's important to note that this is looking specifically at the environmental priorities and doesn't take into account those, and a likely budget would be a lot more if those are factored into the equation as well. There's just one more question in terms of reverse auctions. So do you have any practical examples of them working within the UK?
Yeah, so they've been applied quite successfully it's a scheme by N-Trade, which is Wessex Water is involved, and it's been used to improve water quality in the southwest of England. And so effectively farmers have bid to provide actions designed to meet water quality objectives, such as winter cover crops, for example, and grassland reversion, and that's been shown to deliver improvements in water quality more cost effectively than current payment schemes under the Agri-Environment Programme. So that's a good example. There are a few examples in Europe, but there's also quite wide application of this approach in North America and Australia, for example, which we can also learn from. But something that's definitely definitely needs to be tested and applied more widely.
Well, thank you, and I think there's a lot of learning to undertake on what other countries have done and how things have worked and been applied in other areas as well. No, thank you very much for that overview and the insight into the agricultural economics. Personally, it takes quite a while for me to get my head around a lot of them, so that's shown a lot for me as well. So thank you, Matt. We're just about to finish here, so we're towards the end of time. So I'd just like to say thanks to everyone for tuning in today and for tuning in previously as well, and to all our speakers today and in the last session as well. I've personally found it really useful, and I hope you guys all have as well. We will be sending out the presentations to everyone towards the end of the week, and we'll be sending links of the webinars as well by email. So yeah, look out for those. And once again, thank you very much for tuning in, and hope to see some of you all very soon. Thanks very much. All the best.